Greetings YouTube, my name is Tyler and this is a book haul. As you know, my book hauls tend to be pretty tiny. I know people like to save all their books and then do big giant book hauls. I don't tend to do that. So this will be a small book haul, but I wanted to get them hauled before I wrap them for my blind TBR shelf. So I thought I would just show you what I got. So this weekend I went to the Beautiful Idea in Charlottesville, which is a anti-fascist, anarchist bookstore collective type thing. And they had multiple books that had been on my TBR for a while that none of my libraries had and I had never seen in store before. So I just couldn't control myself. I had to get them. So let's talk about books. First, Johnny Appleseed by Joshua Whitehead. I've seen this floating around the internet. It's been on my TBR. I've added it to my TBR because I have been reading a lot of Indigenous authors in the last few years, and I know a lot of people have enjoyed this. Off the res and trying to find ways to live, love, and survive in the big city, Johnny has 1 week before he must return to his home and his former life to attend the funeral of his stepfather. The 7 days that follow are like a fevered dream. Johnny Appleseed is a unique, shattering vision of Indigenous life full of grit, glitter, and dreams. So pick this up. The other Indigenous book that I had picked up and had been on my TBR and none of my libraries had, and I'll apologize for pronunciation. I did try to look it up, and this author has changed their name, so that made it difficult. But even when I looked up their new name with this book title, I could not find anyone actually saying it. So I am just taking a wild guess. But Nitisinaq, and it says by Lindsay Nixon, but they changed their name to Yaz M. Morgan sometime in the last year or two, I believe. But this is a memoir, I believe. How Do You Honor Blood and Chosen Kin with Equal Care? A groundbreaking memoir spanning nations, prairie punk scenes, and queer love stories woven around grief over the loss of their mother. Explores despair and healing through community and family and being torn apart by the same. Again, an Indigenous author. Both of these Canadian Indigenous folks. I believe I added them to the TBR because I believe they're both queer. I feel like maybe Joshua Whitehead might be Two-Spirit. I feel like I saw, but now can't find. So but I added them to the TBR last Pride Month because, like I said, I was reading, one of my goals was to read Indigenous authors, and I wanted to read queer Indigenous authors in June. I don't think I ended up actually reading a whole bunch of it, but they had been sitting on the TBR for a while, so I'm excited to dive into this. It's not a goal necessarily this year to read like an Indigenous author every month, but I have found that I really enjoy reading works by Indigenous authors. But I'm hoping, and if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments. I'm hoping to expand more into United States Native Indigenous authors. A lot of what I have read have been based in Canada, and maybe there's a reason for that. I don't know if there's a more thriving literary scene in Canada or what the deal is, but a lot of the Indigenous reads I have read have been Canada-based tribes, and I'm intrigued to learn more and read more fiction from the United States. That's such a weird way to phrase it because it's like, you know, the United States is a colonial project and there are all these different nations that don't necessarily neatly map onto the United States, obviously. But I'm just interested to learn more about those relationships with the US government, and just like stories about land that I am personally familiar with by virtue of being a person who grew up in the United States. Does that make sense? Anyways, so if you know more US based Indigenous authors and you got recs for me, please leave them in the comments because I would love to read more. So those were 2 Indigenous books I picked up. The other book I picked up was Queer Little Nightmares. This is an anthology of monstrous fiction and poetry, and I'm pretty sure Kayla read this, and this is where I got the recommendation. You know, I'm not really an anthology person, but I do tend to like picking up these horror anthologies. So I don't know, I've heard good things. I've seen people talking about it, so I picked it up. And hopefully I love it. So those were the 3 books I got from the bookstore. There is one other book that I am adding to my physical TBR. It's Borderland. This should have got wrapped in the first wrapping of my TBR books. I've had this for a couple years. It just is such like a weird shape that it was sitting on a different shelf than the rest of my physical TBR books when I grabbed them to wrap them in December. And so this one just got lost, and I didn't realize that there was one left that needed to get wrapped. So I was just waiting to wrap this until I had other books to wrap, so I wouldn't know exactly what book this was if I pulled it, because I'm really enjoying the blind aspect of it, just like not having a clue what book I'm gonna pick. So anyways, that's a like tiny book haul. I'm gonna wrap these and add them to my shelf. And that should put me up to 24 books. I am going to reuse some of the wrapping from my previous 2 reads and keep the numbers for that. So 1 and 3 are going back onto the shelf, and 23 and 24 will be also added. So yeah, I will see y'all when I have a book to talk about. All right, bye.